I'm going downstairs. Bye-bye. You want me to come up?
Yeah.
Okay. Welcome, everyone, to this week's Living for Christ, a Walk to Eternity Bobcast. I'm Bob Cook, and today I want to ask a question that may have crossed your mind before. Does God have a sense of humor? Is it okay for Christians to laugh? Should we always be serious? And where does the Bible draw the line between wholesome humor and sinful joking? Some people picture Christians as solemn all the time. Others think laughter has no place in the church or in the Christian life. But is that really what Scripture teaches? Today, we're going to discover that joy and laughter are wonderful gifts from God, but like every gift, they should be used wisely. Well, I'll answer that question with a short answer and an example. God made me, so certainly He has a sense of humor. My life many times feels like a sitcom. In fact, I tell Angel, my wife, this could be a sitcom so often. I feel like I'm stuck in an episode of Seinfeld or King of Queens or Dick Van Dyke or Everybody Loves Raymond or you name the sitcom. Maybe we should think of our life as a sitcom and not take ourselves too seriously. I read an article about that one time, and I thought it made a lot of sense. I think life is simpler when we don't take ourselves too seriously. As Christians, we should certainly take God seriously and sin seriously, but we don't always need to take ourselves so seriously. Humility often allows us to laugh at our own mistakes, admit our shortcomings, and move on. Pride, on the other hand, usually can't laugh at itself. I'm thankful I grew up in a home that had a lot of laughter. Some of my happiest moments were of my dad and mom, siblings, and others laughing in our home. I remember my grandmother visiting. We called her Grandma Mom. And we might be playing a board game, a card game, or just sitting and chatting, and we would get to laughing so hard that she would be crying. By the way, an interesting fact about my grandma. She could touch her nose with her tongue and wasn't afraid to demonstrate it. We keep up the laughing tradition with my sisters and my wife, Angel, and as I've seen all of them laughing to a point of crying many times. I have a lot of material. It's called My Life. I'll make fun of myself to protect some of the innocent or not so innocent who I certainly have material on, but I'll leave it up to them to share and laugh. I bet you have some stories too. I'm sure you do. Take some time to recall them and ponder and smile and laugh. I was the youngest of 4 kids, and my closest sister was 8 years older than me. And then I had a brother 10 years older, and then a sister 12 years older. So I was, I guess, a surprise. My mom actually admitted to that on her deathbed. And I'm like, after all this time, you finally tell me that? And she goes, but you were a good surprise. Even late in her life, she had a good sense of humor. Well, during family conversations, I could hardly get a word in, you can imagine. So I would shout, my turn, trying to get a word in. But I've certainly been making up for lost time and then some. And if you hang around me at all, you can probably attest to that. I recall my oldest sister, Rhonda, 12 years older than me, and her then boyfriend, who's now my brother-in-law, babysitting me when I was like 4 or 5. I was taking a bath, and I always would love to take toys in, like army men, cowboys, and Indians, boats. Everything would be floating in the water. You couldn't even see the water, and I would stay in there until my hands looked like prunes. Well, it was time for me to get out. They were babysitting me, and they asked if I had used soap. And of course, I said yes. Then they inspected the soap, and it was all like crusty and dry and everything. So busted. So I actually had to use soap in my bath. They also tell me about when I was 4 or 5, coming down the stairs from my bedroom in my whitey tighties with a holster around my waist, 2 cap gun pistols, and cowboy boots. Yep, that was me. I recall my siblings teasing me so much that I was in tears, and my dad telling me, well, it's because they love you. And my response would be, well, I wish they didn't love me so much. Once at a church we attended in junior church, a teacher in the front of the room asked if anyone knew anyone who was not a Christian. And I raised my hand and said, my neighbors. They're Lutherans. And the kids laughed at me. And I felt like Pee Wee Herman in The Big Adventure, when he visited the Alamo and was on the tour and he asked where the basement was. And she said, the Alamo doesn't have a basement. And everybody just laughed, and he kind of shrunk and kind of walked away. Now, I know Lutherans are Christians, okay? My buddy, whose son is a Catholic priest, calls Lutherans Catholic light. Just last week, I helped some dear friends extract a bat from their house. And God says that sometimes we go through trials in our life so we can help others in their trials. Well, God has given me a lot of experience with bats and even some flying squirrels in our home, and those are stories in their own. I went to their home last week, and they hadn't seen the bat since early in the morning, and so I did some investigation. They were worn out, they didn't sleep very well, but they couldn't find this bat. Well, it didn't take me long. I found it behind a mirror above their fireplace. As I shined the flashlight back there, my first reaction was, expletive, there it is, followed by, I'm sorry. I won't say it, but it rhymes with the nautical word ship. That was just my reaction, because they still kind of freak me out, okay? Even though I've seen and I've captured many of them. So even though I have a lot of experience, they freak me out. I first experienced a bat in college, and I've had bats in our cabin and flying squirrels in our cabin, and Angel being home alone one night and calling me, and I was a couple hours away for work, and I was trying to talk her through trying to catch a flying squirrel, and finally just said, that's it, I'm going to come home and help. And it was a tricky flying squirrel too. Yeah, back in college, I remember hearing something against the wall of my bedroom. My roommate and I lived in this old house just on the edge of campus, and it had a dirt floor basement. That's how old this place was. But I kept hearing something, and I'm like, well, what's that? So I leaned over, turned on a light, and kind of lay back down, and this bat swooped right down in front of my face. And it freaked me out, and I ran down through the house and went to my roommate's room and said, there's a bat. And he goes, you must have been dreaming. I go, no. And he goes, well, maybe it got out. And I'm like, no. And so he stepped out, and that bat flew down the hallway, circled our heads a few times. We ran back in his room, and he said, that is one big bat. And so we spent like several hours trying to look for the bat. We turned on MTV, back when MTV actually was music television, and we waited for this bat, and then here it comes, and down the hallway, like a vampire movie, like a Dracula movie with the wings going back and forth. And then it came in, and I had this dust mop. I think he had a broom, And he describes it as I stepped up like a samurai warrior and started swinging this broom trying to get this bat, and drapes were flying, and he had this really nice stereo, and he was kind of freaking out that I'd hit his stereo. But anyway, it went around our head a few times, went back in the kitchen. Long story short, we finally, after a few other humorous circumstances, we finally got it, and we actually let it go off of our front porch, and by then the sun was coming up. And I remember I was dating Angel at the time, and I called her the next day because I was like, I had PTSD, man. I couldn't sleep for several nights after that, and she thought it was really funny. So anyway, a lot of stories around critters. And when you look at some of the animals God made, I think it shows his sense of humor and creativity. Think about the elephant with its long nose, It's very practical for an elephant, They can use it as a snorkel in the water, They can use it to pick up things. It's really strong. Or a giraffe with its really long neck, how awkward they look. But they're beautiful. I love looking at them at the zoo. And what about a white-tailed deer? We have those all around here. And I can just see God making the deer. And then as he watched man, hunting and trying to hunt this deer, he realized, okay, this is way too tough for man. I gotta make this a little bit easier. So he creates a white tail on a deer that flies up as the deer takes off just to give man a fighting chance. I always thought that was so strange. Like, wow, what else, what else can you do? Now, as a hunter, I haven't been real successful at getting deer, but we'll see about this fall. Now, I recall enjoying laughter as early as I can remember. I believe if we're human, made in God's image, we all can relate to that. I recall my Aunt Jean, my mom's sister, having a laughing box. I think it was more of a bag. And when you turned it on, it just laughed and laughed. And it made me laugh. And every time we visited, I wanted to listen to it. But sometimes the batteries were dead. Really? After all these years, as I'm doing this Bobcast, I'm just thinking like, were the batteries really dead? Or did they just not want to get the thing out? And it also makes me think of my Grandpa Cook's hammock. I always wanted to lay in that hammock when we visited, but for some reason, sometimes it was broken. No wonder I'm so screwed up. Sometimes I think, did these grown-ups just not want to get the hammock out? Did they not want to listen to the laughing box? I don't know. Do we do that as grown-ups sometimes to our children? Well, we are born with this inherent nature to smile and to laugh. No one teaches us that, right? It just comes, it happens. You can see it in very, very young babies and as they get older. Now, my son Caleb sent us a video some time ago, it's a number of months ago, of our 2-year-old grandson Colton laughing. And I had used this to open up the Bobcast today. That was little Colton laughing at Caleb. Now, I used to do this thing when our boys were young. When I was behind our counter and they were on the other side, I would act like I was going downstairs into like a basement. And so as I walked, I would squat down little by little, looking like I was going down steps. I mean, you get the picture. So Caleb was doing that, the same thing with our grandson Colton, as he sat at their island. And as I said, I opened today's episode with his laughter. And here it is again.
I'm going downstairs. Bye-bye. You want me to come up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Little Colton was laughing so hard his head was tilting back and he was holding his tummy. Now, no one taught him that, right? It's in our DNA to laugh. Now, my pastor, Pastor Chris from Lakeside Family Church in Stevensville, Michigan, he's a funny guy. He gets it honestly from his dad, Richard, who had a great sense of humor. And Pastor Chris does a great job teaching God's truth, but has a good time while he's doing it. And it's not unusual for there to be laughter during a morning service. I think it's great. You know, there's a quote, and I don't know who said it, but it goes something like, laughter is good medicine. And I believe that's true. Proverbs 17:22 says, a cheerful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up the bones. This doesn't mean laughter cures disease, although it just may have a chance at times. But it does teach that joy, gladness, and a healthy spirit have real value for our physical and emotional well-being. Modern research has actually found that laughter can reduce stress hormones, lower blood pressure temporarily, improve mood by releasing endorphins, strengthen social bonds, even increase pain tolerance for a time. Ecclesiastes 3:4 says, there's a time to weep and a time to laugh. Psalms 126 verse 2 says, our mouths were filled with laughter and our tongues with songs of joy. If you ever want to laugh, you're having a hard day, and you just need some medicine, look up Nate Bargatze on YouTube. He is clean, and he is so funny. Or there's a Christian comedian, Mark Lowry, from the 80s and the 90s. Funny guy and a great singer. He used to be part of the Bill Gaither vocal band. But both of these guys, and I'm sure there are many others that are just so funny. And you just need a smile on your face sometimes. So that was my long intro, and I hope it gave you some laughs or smiles, even if they were at my expense. But I want to cover 10 biblical points about laughter. So if you're taking notes, 10 biblical points. Here we go. God created joy, laughter, and humor. Everything good comes from God. James 1:17 says, every good and perfect gift is from above. Now, if God created joy, if he created smiling, if he created laughter, then laughter itself isn't sinful. It's what we do with it that matters. God didn't accidentally invent laughter. He designed us with the ability to enjoy life, to have life and have it more abundantly, right? So that was one. Now, two, we are made in God's image. Genesis 1:27, we're made in God's image. That doesn't mean God tells jokes like we do, but he created creativity, surprise, delight, relationships, and joy. Those things reflect his character. Number three, Sarah, Abraham's wife, laughed. Remember, we covered that a few weeks ago in the Living for Christ series, A Genesis Flyover. It's one of the Bible's greatest stories. But why did Sarah laugh? Do you remember? In Genesis 18, Sarah hears she'll have a baby, and she laughs. She was old and well beyond the accepted childbearing years. I think she may have been surprised, maybe skeptical, and she lied and said she didn't laugh, but God called her out. Maybe he was playing with her just a little bit. Honestly, most of us probably would have laughed in her position. Then after Isaac is born in Genesis 21:6, Sarah says, God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me. Isaac literally means he laughs. God allowed an entire nation to begin with a child whose name means laughter. That's beautiful. Okay, number 4. Jesus enjoyed being around people. Now, the Bible never specifically says Jesus laughed, but I can't believe he didn't. I mean, you've got to, based on some of the circumstances and what the Bible says. But think about it. Children loved him. He attended weddings. He ate meals with friends. People invited him into their homes. He wasn't gloomy. He was very approachable. Imagine trying to keep children away from someone who never smiled. It just wouldn't happen. Jesus smiled many, many times. I think, and I've mentioned this on past podcasts before, but The Chosen, that series, The Chosen, I think does such a great job, portraying Jesus. And Jonathan Rumi is the actor that portrays Jesus, and he does a good job. It's just a very good. It really kind of puts pictures in your mind of biblical truth, and they do a very good job of sticking to the truth in the Bible. So number 5, Jesus used humor. This is one of my favorite observations. Jesus often used exaggeration to make people think. Imagine hearing him say, "A camel through the eye of a needle." Really? A man with a plank sticking out of his eye criticizing someone with a speck. People straining out a tiny gnat while swallowing an entire camel. Those mental pictures are almost comical, or they are comical. I'm sure they made people smile, and then they remembered the lesson he was teaching. Great teachers often use humor, and Jesus did too. Number 6, don't take yourself too seriously. I alluded to this in my introduction because I think it is one of the keys to our having the joy God intended. It's something I've been learning and continue to learn. Take God seriously, take his word seriously, and take sin seriously. But don't always take yourself so seriously. Humility allows us to laugh at ourselves. Pride can't. Sometimes God teaches us through our mistakes or challenges. Now, golf has certainly taught me a number of things in life. Some good and some not so good. But not taking myself too seriously is one of the good. In our Lakeside Family Church Golf League, interestingly enough, called Tragic, TRAGIC, which is an acronym that actually gives honor to Pastor Chris's dad. I was playing a dogleg right par 5 hole a while back, and you can play it safe and kind of lay up straight down to the corner and then start playing, across that dog leg, or you can go through the woods to cut off the dog leg. Well, my success percentage is not great going through the woods, but I did make it through a couple weeks ago. At one time, I tried it and I hit a tree immediately. I entered the woods a little ways and hit a tree. I went in, I found my ball. I proceeded to hit it again. I hit a tree again further down through the woods, and it bounced back to my feet, right where I started. I mean, literally, I didn't even have to move. So I swung again, and hit it into another tree, and it bounced back way over my head deep into the woods. And at that point, I was just shaking my head and I didn't even go look for it. You know, there's a saying as we golf together that, you know, when you look at a tree, there's a majority of air. You know, it's like 80% air and maybe 20% sticks and leaves. But why is it that we always hit hard wood? You know, I've also been known to take some pretty hard practice swings, if you know what I mean. And, you know, it can tear a rotator cuff, man. That hurts. And, you know, professionals have even done that too. I saw a video one time of a professional doing a hard practice swing. Now, during practice rounds only, of course, I wouldn't do it during our regulation league rounds. I've been known to take a mulligan or two. And, you know, anyone that knows me or has golfed with me can probably laugh about that. But remember the movie Tin Cup with Kevin Costner hitting over the water? It's got to bring a smile or laugh to you. Check it out. What a great movie. It's really good. And when you see that scene, you'll remember exactly what I was talking about. So as you can see, I have a lot of material, and golf is just one of my sources, and I could go on. Now, Proverbs 11:2 says, "When pride comes, then comes disgrace, but with humility comes wisdom." A humble Christian can smile and admit, well, that didn't go exactly as I planned. I've got to keep that in my repertoire because that didn't go exactly as I planned. It should be something I can say often. So often I kid around with Angel about my projects around the house and how they can take much, much longer than what I had anticipated. All right, we're to 7.7. A cheerful heart is good medicine. We talked a little bit about this earlier. Remember from the introduction, Proverbs 17:22 says, "A cheerful heart is good medicine." God knew thousands of years ago what science is still discovering. Joy helps us. Encouragement helps us. Laughter can even strengthen relationships. Sometimes a smile is exactly what another person needs. You know, they have people come into nursing homes and hospitals and things like that. People where people can be pretty down at times, right? Due to a health concern, due to the difficulties of aging and such. And, you know, they'll bring in people with pets, you know, with a dog, and allow the people to pet the dog and or pet a puppy. And, you know, it's pretty hard not to smile when you're petting a cute little puppy, you know. And I remember back in 4th grade, I got very, very sick, and I spent some time in the hospital. And perhaps we'll talk about that another time. But I can remember a clown coming in to visiting the hospital and visiting the kids that were in the hospital. And that was pretty cool. And it ended up that I think that clown was actually a friend of my dad's, a guy that he had worked with. So I think maybe he did that on a regular basis, and I just happened to be there, or maybe even made a special trip. I don't know. But I was appreciative to that because I was not the happiest at that point in time. It was kind of scary being a fourth grader and being in the hospital alone. Well, number 8, there is a time to laugh. Ecclesiastes 3:4, a time to weep and a time to laugh. Notice, God doesn't say never laugh, nor does he say laugh all the time. Life has seasons, right? Christians can cry with those who cry. The last thing that we want to do is make light of someone's very difficult situation. And I'm sure, I hope I haven't done it, but I have heard of it being done before, where Christians want to just make light of a situation. They're meaning well, but there are times when people just do not feel like laughing, and it's better to put an arm around them and listen and cry with them and share that burden with them, right? So Christians can cry with those who cry, but we can also laugh with those who laugh and have joy. Have joy for the success of others. Have joy and laugh with, I didn't say laugh at, laugh with those who are laughing. So, number 9, where humor crosses the line. Now, I do need to provide a disclaimer that coarse joking is a slippery slope. Early in my career, I was with a group of guys and someone told a joke. And I don't know whether I was the first one, but I was early on. Then I told a joke. And then someone else, and so on. But the jokes progressively got more coarse and offensive in some regard. And I ended up leaving. I have to admit, I ended up leaving at some point because I thought, okay, this is going down a really bad road here. And it may have continued a little after I left. But the next day, I found myself called into human resources, as well as other people did too, all individually, alone, getting called in. And there was an investigation as someone had reported offensive behavior. And so each one of us kind of had to give our story. And I said, hey, this is the joke I heard. This is the joke I told, and so on and so forth. So I learned early on to be careful with my words. I'm not saying I do it perfectly, but I realized that no one should feel offended or feel uncomfortable when they're at work, let alone just anywhere. So we must learn to monitor what comes out of our mouths. We've talked about how powerful words are in past Bobcasts also. But I learned a lesson that day. Balance is important. Not everything called humor honors God. And Paul warns us in Ephesians 5:3-4, nor should there be obscenity, foolish talk, or coarse joking, which are out of place, but rather thanksgiving. Let's have thanksgiving instead, right? God isn't against laughter. He's against humor that tears people down. Dirty jokes, crude humor, sexual jokes, humiliating people, mocking others, making light of sin. If someone has to be embarrassed so we can laugh, it's probably not Christ-like humor. Ask yourself, does this joke honor Christ? Would I tell it if Jesus were standing beside me? Would I tell it if my mom was standing beside me? Would I tell it if my grandmother was standing beside me? But you know what? Jesus is always standing beside you. God sees everything. Number 10, even our humor should build people up. We should not have fun at another's expense. Many hurtful things are said disguised as jokes. I used to remind my boys when they were young, be careful what you say about and to others. Because when you're in a group of people, you may be kidding and teasing someone, and they may be laughing on the outside, but crying on the inside. Too often, I think kids pick things that another kid has no control over. Kids get to the point where, as they're growing and maturing, they look awkward, they mature at different rates and things like that. And unfortunately, they can say hurtful things. And it's just kids being dumb kids, right? So we don't want to take it too personal, that's for sure, or take it personal at all. But when you're, 12 or 10 or what have you, it's hard. Ephesians 4:29 says, "Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up." Imagine if Christians became known for humor that encouraged instead of embarrassed. Imagine being the person who always leaves others smiling without ever compromising holiness. I always think it's so interesting and refreshing when you hear a comedian that can get laughs without the shock of coarse words and in situations that are inappropriate. Or comedies that can have you laughing deep into your gut, and they didn't have to go and cross the line. I think that it's just so refreshing. I love it. Point 11. Now, earlier I said that we were going to have 10 points, but we actually have 11. So there's an added bonus. So this one goes to 11. But I know, why didn't I just make 10, 11? Make 10 a little higher. But this one goes to 11. That's a line from the movie Spinal Tap, which is, I've seen bits and pieces that are really funny. I have not seen the whole movie, so I caution you. But there's some great lines, and it's pretty funny. It makes fun of rockumentaries. And the last point here. This surprises some people. Psalm 2:4 says, "The one enthroned in heaven laughs." Now, God isn't laughing at suffering. It's laughter at the foolish arrogance of those who think they can overthrow God's purposes. It reminds us God is never worried. Nothing catches him off guard, right? It catches us off guard. And, I think of the Tower of Babel and how God must have just shook his head and rolled his eyes, and maybe even chuckled a little bit about these people think they can build a tower to heaven. So he took care of that, didn't he? We talked about that in a flyover, a Genesis flyover as well, didn't we? Well, I just want to say, maybe today you've wondered if Christians should laugh. The answer is unequivocally yes. Laugh often. Have you ever seen the signs for sale in gift shops and stores and hanging in many people's homes or put above their doors? Live, love, laugh. Or live, laugh, love. I don't know. I might have had them out of order, but regardless, they're all three very good things. Smile often. Enjoy your family, enjoy your friends, tell funny stories, laugh at yourself every once in a while. Just don't laugh at sin. Don't laugh at someone else's pain. Don't let your humor dishonor Christ. Instead, let your joy point people to Jesus, because the Christian should be the most hopeful person in the room. Not because life is easy, but because we know the one who holds tomorrow. I just want to close with a real brief prayer. Father, thank you for the gift of joy. Thank you for laughter, friendship, family, and all the wonderful moments you give us each day. Help us to use our words to encourage rather than wound. Guard us from humor that dishonors you, but help us to reflect the joy that comes from knowing Christ. May our smiles, our laughter, and our lives point others toward you. In Jesus' precious name, amen. Well, perhaps one of the greatest compliments someone could give a Christian is this: I don't know what it is about them, but whenever I'm around them, I leave with a little more hope and a smile on my face. If our joy reflects the joy we found in Christ, then even our laughter can become a quiet testimony to the goodness of God. I hope in your mind now you're thinking about someone that you've been around that you think, that's the person, that's him or her. When I was around them, I just had a smile. I felt good. They built me up. And they didn't even do that much. They may have just said an encouraging word or hello or talked, but may God let us all be that person to others. Until next time, keep your eyes on Jesus, keep walking by faith, and remember, we're all taking a walk toward eternity. That walk is going to be a little bit shorter than others, right? But that's in God's hands. We don't know. Tell someone you love them today. God bless. And here's a little laughter to end the podcast to carry you through the rest of the day.
I'm going downstairs. Bye-bye. You want me to come up? Yeah. Okay. Ha ha!